Hey, Next Levelers. Bob Gibbons here with the Next Level Show. Here for another week of interesting conversation about entrepreneurship, why people start companies, why they want to quit getting that nice, cushy paycheck from somebody else with benefits and go out into the dark world of doing it yourself and hopefully one day getting money, getting paid if you're lucky. Well, today's guests are Will Coleman and Alex Halbardier. I don't know if I just slaughtered that or not. Halbardier?
That's as good as it gets.
Is there a better way to say that, Will?
I don't even think that the Halbardiers really want to hear me talk about their last name.
There's a history there. Well, they are with Alto, and you can find out more about them at ridealto.com. And Alto is a new and interesting, better way to get from point A to point B than what you're used to doing. So we're looking forward to talking about that. Will and Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bob. Great to be here.
So my first question is, almost everybody has taken the rides, through a taxi, through a bus, through a train, through an Uber, a Lyft, et cetera. Why in the world do we need yet another way to get around?
Yeah, it's a great question. One we often get a lot.
Sorry to be so common.
Happy to. It's a great way to dive straight in. I mean, the short answer is that I felt like as a consumer that ride sharing really changed my life. I was a consultant for 11 years for a big consulting firm, traveling all over the U.S. and around the world. And the convenience of being able to order a car and have it arrive within minutes, the transparency of being able to see where it came from, really changed the way that I thought about travel. And I saw that was disrupting, the travel industry as a whole, thinking about rental cars and hotels, the way people arrive to get to hotels, the way they get to airports and interact with airlines. But I realized actually as part of that it hadn't really changed my wife's life. In fact, she didn't even have the apps on her phone. And in doing some research, we found that my wife was pretty normal. In fact, women were half as likely to be active users of the big platforms that
Really?
Of Uber and Lyft as men.
Don't they need it just as often as we would?
You would think that is the case. They do have a lot of needs, but they also have unmet needs. They're less concerned just about convenience and more concerned about safety, more concerned about consistency, more concerned about control of their experience. And in fact, 75% of the non-users told us that their personal safety was the reason that they weren't using it. And when we started to really look into the market, we realized that, one, that's a pretty big segment. Closing that gap in usage between men and women would create a revenue opportunity double the size of Lyft. And
wait, hang on a second. You just said something really big there.
Yeah.
A revenue opportunity double that of Lyft.
Yeah, Lyft does about $8 billion, did about $8 billion last year in gross bookings. That's the total fare that customers pay. And just closing that gap in women usage, we think is an opportunity of about $16 billion.
That's incredible. Now, okay, so
we started there and we said we really think there's an opportunity to serve women in a different way, but we also knew that we needed to be able to, it's a business that requires demand throughout the day. So you need multiple different segments. So we also started looking at what other segments could we serve. And we started interviewing and did some research with professionals and also found that professionals had many of the same needs. I was actually seeing this in my own behavior. The convenience was nice, but the inconsistency was really driving me crazy. I didn't ever know what was going to come. Was the car going to be safe? Was the driver going to be safe? And so I actually found myself using traditional forms of mobility more than Uber and Lyft.
Traditional forms meaning renting a car
or
a taxi,
having a driver, calling a taxi.
Limo service, et cetera. Yeah, and I've used the limo service, and that is awfully nice, but it's also very expensive.
Super expensive.
And you don't, and it's not something that's just in time. It's not something you can just, I need it right now, right? You got to set that up in advance.
Exactly. And so that's where we had the idea that said, what if we could kind of do both? What if we could be convenient and on demand, but also do that in a way that was safe, that was consistent, and that gave our passengers greater control of their experience and really focused on that, the passenger experience, not just the experience of booking a ride, but the experience in taking one.
And you said you were in consulting, so you were at McKinsey. And Alex, I know you were at Boston Consulting Group,
yes.
Was it? So we got a couple of really smart blue bloods here. Were you doing these kinds of consulting assignments for other ride sharing or transportation related services? I mean, is that why you got into this so deep?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been really interested in the travel space. So I spent my entire career, almost 11 years at McKinsey, serving big travel companies, airlines, hotels, car rental companies. And I was seeing that disruption that was happening to their businesses from these new forms of personal mobility. And so in studying that with my clients, I then kind of got pretty deep in to the existing business models and had an opportunity to serve other clients on how they might be able to think about future mobility. So I was working with car manufacturers and OEMs and even VCs and other investors thinking about the implications of this kind of change in the mobility landscape in the U.S. and around the world.
So I know I've seen in the news examples of safety issues, both for the passengers and for the drivers, for that matter, within the other ride-sharing services. So, Alex, I mean, you're obviously a woman. So,
yes.
What was your experience?
I'm glad you think it's obvious.
Well, all right. I'm not going any further down that road. But what was your experience in transportation before you got involved with Alto?
It's interesting. I was living in New York City when Uber launched, and I remember saying to my now husband when we were living there, you know, like, this is so strange. This person, we don't know anything about this person, you know. And in New York, you obviously have to. It's a very high bar to be a taxi driver, right? I mean, it's different in other markets, but you have to invest a huge sum of your personal capital, and it's your livelihood. And I remember thinking, like, how do I know that this person who's transporting me is invested and that you know, they're really doing this for the right reasons? And so it's an anxiety that I harbored for a long time, and I had many people tell me that, you know, I was paranoid or crazy or, you know, things like that. But I do think that that the safety aspect resonates with a lot of women, and it's not that they're being, you know, judgmental or that they're, you know, doing it for any reason, but being in a car with someone is a very personal experience. Yeah, you know, you grow up, when you're a daughter of someone, you often grow up having people tell you not to get in other people's cars, like your entire life. And so to just hop in someone's car, it just like, it's a strange feeling. And so, you know, when Will kind of first approached me about doing this together, I got it. Like, I think a lot of people might, on the surface, before they hear about the intricacies of the business model, say, oh, you're going to go up against giants. Like, you're crazy. Right. But I really got it because I am the consumer. Yeah. Like, especially if I'm alone.
My daughter lives in Washington, D.C. in the district. So she spends a lot of time with ride sharing platforms. And I haven't had a chance to ask her about this. So I'm anxious to do that now, but it hadn't really occurred to me because I guess my assumption was that when I call an Uber, I call a Lyft, that there is already a built-in trust because I assume they've already checked out their drivers, that they have given them some sort of, you know, screening to make sure that they're not criminals, to make sure they know what they're doing behind a wheel. And so now I can guarantee on my side, they haven't checked me out at all. So in a way, I almost feel like the drivers are more at risk than the passengers.
I think the way, and Will can talk more about the point you just mentioned about the in-depth safety piece, but the emotional experience that I think that Alto gives you is you just feel at ease. Like you feel like your safety isn't even, you don't have to worry about it at all. You know, like you could fall asleep in the car and you wouldn't be worried.
Okay, but what is it about that?
Well, so...
And I think there's a major piece of this that I'm kind of going to drive to. But why do you think that is the case?
Because your safety's a given.
Why?
You know,
so to your point, I mean, our competitors are doing things to try and keep their platform safe. No question, they do background checks and have a lot of features in the app to try to provide safety to the customer. But at the end of the day, we feel really strongly that the independent contractor model is inherently flawed in providing a safe experience. Mm-hmm. And there's really three reasons why. The first is take the driver out of it. The car that you're in, driving is an inherently unsafe activity. The car that you're in is a really, really, really big factor to how safe the ride is. And when somebody brings their own car to the platform, especially when that car can be 15 model years or newer, which is the current limitation for Uber and Lyft, when that car can be 15 model years or newer, it may not have the latest safety features. It may not even have, working airbags. And so the car is a really important component, and having the ability to bring safe vehicles that we maintain, inspect for safety issues daily, and that are owned by the company, that's a really big piece of it. The second part is the driver itself. So driving is an inherently unsafe activity. You can't performance manage independent contractors. It's literally illegal. And with employees, you can. So our technology, like I said, extends all the way into the ride. That's both for the passenger and for the driver. We have telematics in the car that are constantly tracking the driver's driving behavior. That's tied to an interior and exterior facing video camera that provides a live feed into the car that's securely recorded on the cloud that allows us to see what's happening inside and outside the car at all times. And we can performance manage drivers on driving safely. That means that on a weekly basis, we actually have an algorithm that computes a safety score based on things like speeding, acceleration and deceleration, turning. And those are all things that only we can do because we have an employee model. And then the third thing is employees mean that we can vet people much more thoroughly than independent contractors. Sure, you can do a name-based background check with an independent contractor, but to be an Alto driver, you need to first come and sit for an interview. We actually are very selective about our employees. We hire well less than 10% of the number of people that apply.
Really?
And you sit for an interview. Then we go through two forms of background checks, both a name-based check and a fingerprint check. And then the third is a drug test. And all of that we can maintain over time because they're our employees and they have a constant relationship with our company.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We are back on the Next Level Show, and we're talking to Alex and Will, and they are with Alto. And it's a ride-sharing service that has some twists on it that are really great for the passengers and the members. So ridealto.com, check them out. All right, so we were talking about the safety before the break, and I think that's huge. So you're obviously doing a lot more than sort of the, quote, norm to make sure people are safe. And one of the things you mentioned was the cars. So you own your cars. That's really unusual. Everybody else seems to, just whoever wants to sign up to be a driver, tags their car in. What kind of cars are people going to be riding in if they become a member and join your service?
Yeah, all of our cars in our fleet today are Buick Enclaves. It's a 6-passenger SUV. It's 5-star crash rated. We like it for not only its safety, but also for its functionality. It serves a bunch of different use cases, can seat 6 adults comfortably, plenty of room for baggage on your way to the airport. So it's a great ride whether you're one person or 5 friends going out on a town or on the town for a date.
And how do they know? I mean, if I'm sitting there on the curb waiting for my car, how do I know which is the Alto car?
Well, there's a few great features. I mean, one thing we pride ourselves is having branded, very visible cars. So each car says Alto right on the door. So
painted on the side of the door.
Yeah, you know that it's an Alto car. The same way you would have identified a taxi cab kind of back in the day. The second thing is we actually have a functionality built into the app where you can identify your vehicle and custom lights flash in the grille so that as it's approaching if there are multiple Altos, which one's yours.
Wow.
And then we have the standard license plate identification that kind of all ride-sharing platforms have.
Interesting. I like that because I do a lot of Uber and Lyft as I travel around the world, and it's it's convenient. I love it. It's easy. In fact, I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago, or a little more than that, end of February. I was in Germany and Austria, and we rented a car. That's the first time I've rented a car traveling anywhere for a long time. And it's because I couldn't take an Uber or Lyft for 8 hours as I drove around Bavaria. But it was kind of a weird feeling. And once we got into the city, oh man, what a pain a car is. I didn't want a car. Parking and then, the hotel. Well, in fact, we just parked it at the hotel. They wanted €20 a day just to park it. And then we're still, walking or using something else. So it just felt like a really weird experience to rent a car instead of just hailing a car or, calling one up on my app. So tell me more about the app. It sounds like there's some unique features to the app, like the flashing lights on the grill. So what else is going on with this app that's different?
Yeah, our app, we see our experience really as the ride itself. So the app is a conduit, a channel to allow you to book a ride and to see where your ride's coming and make it convenient to request one. But it also extends into the ride. And we think about providing that experience in the ride is really our big differentiator.
Into the ride. So I don't just put my phone away when I get in the car.
You don't put your phone, well, you can if you'd like to. You can preset your preferences before you get in the car. But while you're in the car, you can change what we call your vibe, which is the music, the lighting, and even the conversation level with your driver. So you can put your driver on Do Not Disturb, or show them that you would like just a quiet, peaceful ride to the airport.
So I can put my fellow passengers on Do Not Disturb as well.
That's something
Not
that
yet.
I think,
That's
not
hilarious.
fully built in today, but maybe shortly.
Well, that's really unusual because one of the things that I kind of find interesting about the ride sharing is every time I get into that car, it's a different experience. And sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes the person hasn't exactly learned where the soap dish is yet. Or sometimes, like I was in DC visiting my daughter, this guy was the most amazing driver I've ever seen. He's got the disco ball on the ceiling, he's got karaoke going, he's got all kinds of mints and chewing gum, and he's got water in the doors that you can enjoy. And I mean, he was the most amazing. And then he even pulled out microphones for karaoke. So you could sing
right there in the car.
Right there in the car.
Yeah.
And my wife and daughter in the back seat, just going off on this song. It was fun, but that is not the norm.
Yeah, we think that consistency is really key here, right? And so, in addition to safety, consistency is the thing that we're really focused on. We believe that we're not as good as our best ride, but we're as good as our worst ride. And so we're trying to build a brand that is known, that you can trust to be consistent and reliable. You can buy a coffee at a Quick Trip or a gas station for a few dollars, or maybe less than $1, but people go to Starbucks because they look the same, they smell the same, and they taste the same every single time. And you have a different barista, but you have the same experience. And that's what we want you to have at Alto, is a different driver, but the exact same experience every time you get in our car.
Interesting. And so back to the app real quick for the in-flight experience. You said the Do Not Disturb. You said lighting, music.
Yep. Yeah. So we
Yeah,
install lights and integrate into the sound system in the vehicle today. And we're also right now working both independently and with potential partners to directly connect into the vehicle to give our passengers even more control of things like the HVAC or the locks or the windows. And we really think that over time, focusing on that passenger experience and giving the passengers the same amount of control that they would have as a driver really is what will ultimately differentiate us.
That is really cool. You need to find a partnership with those people that make those chairs in Brookstones that massage you.
Yeah.
I want
Just
that
go
massage.
super premium.
Exactly. At least be an option. Maybe I can
Yeah.
We just want the chair to get to the right position for you in the first place, and then we'll get to massaging.
just show me where I can drop that quarter and make that baby
Yeah.
buzz.
In-car manicures. Just go all the way.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, that brings up a whole nother thing that we're not going to have time for that. It takes me back to the Taxi, the show Taxi. But anyway, we'll talk about that another time. So what's with the name Alto?
So Alto means elevated in Romance languages, also kind of high if in Spanish. And we really think we're creating an elevated experience. Sometimes we say we're taking the high road. So if you see our logo, it kind of looks like two roads converging on an elevated horizon. And we really believe that we're a cut above, that we're delivering a better
Very nice.
experience.
Well, it sounds like you are. So if I walk out of this building right now, I walk out of the studio, and I just want to take an Alto, I can't just do that, can I?
No, you have to become a member to take an Alto. So this goes back to our promise about consistency, is that we want to be able to deliver the best experience to our members every time. And part of that, comes with making sure that we limit our membership to people who really want to ride with us. And so by having a membership model, you pay $12 a month. You get a black car quality service at roughly half the cost of, the higher end services. And on top of that, we never surge our pricing. So you're going to have a consistent fare whether you're going out to dinner on a peak time on a Saturday evening or whether you're just going to work on a Wednesday morning at some time when we're not quite as busy. So that allows us to deliver that consistency and that safety. And it makes our drivers feel, safe too, and get to see some of the same faces and give them a predictable experience, because what we found is that the driver experience is as important as the customer experience. I mean, they're the ones delivering the customer experience. So making sure that they're benefiting from those brand values of safety, consistency, and hospitality, goes a long way.
Yeah, we've had a lot of people on the show that have talked about culture for their employees as being the number one most important thing. Historically, you always hear people say customer first, the customer's always right. Well, they would say baloney. The customer can't be always right. The employee must be the focus, because if you don't treat your employee right, they're not going to treat your customer right.
100%.
That's absolutely the case. When we set out to change the passenger experience, but we knew in order to do that, we had to change the driver experience. And that was another important reason to go to an employee model, was because giving drivers that sense of safety, of consistency, knowing exactly how much they were going to make each week so that they could take care of themselves and take care of their family, providing them with the normal benefits that you would get through an employment model, like Social Security and workers' comp, but we also pay 100% of their healthcare premiums.
What?
And so it's those sorts of things that we think allow our drivers to be in the mindset that is required to deliver on that great passenger
startup
experience.
where I can go work and get 100% healthcare. That's amazing.
I mean, we're trying, in some ways people ask us, what brands do you look to as inspiration? And I mean, this is where the Starbucks analogy comes back again. It's like, how do you, if you really make a career, a career path and a career and a sustainable living for people, it's just, they feel motivated and excited to be part of a team, then the way they treat your customers is just an extension of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'd mentioned, Alex, that once I pay my $12 or $12.95 monthly membership fee, then my rides are less costly than?
Well, so a lot of our customers, some are taking all across modes of transportation, but what our quality level is that of a limo type service or a black car. So if you were kind of buying that quality level at a competitor or anywhere, we would be, a substantial discount off of that. Our prices are roughly in line with Uber Select, which is their kind of middle tier. Mm-hmm. And, the quality you get for the price is unparalleled.
Interesting.
And, we never surge. So that's a huge benefit, because a lot of times you're, at a busy time, you're going to see huge, 200%, 100% premiums at other ride shares. And with us, we want you to know what you're getting always across all dimensions.
Well, yeah, it's funny because Uber is incredibly consistent in Seattle. I was in Seattle on a conference, and my wife came and we stayed through the weekend. We probably took 15 Ubers that weekend. Every single one of them was a Middle Eastern guy in a Prius. Every single time. It was almost hilarious. I almost was like, well, if they weren't different colored cars, I would think they were all the same car. But I mean, it was good service and all, but it was interesting. But the surge pricing was very eye opening, because sometimes we'd go to the same place but at a different time, and the pricing was wildly different. Yeah,
and we heard when we were designing our product from our customers that was a big pain point, that people don't mind, paying for a certain quality level, but that has to be something they can predict on both sides, that you know what you're going to pay and you know what you're going to get. I mean, people make that decision from the start.
Yep.
And
all right, we're going to take another quick break. We'll be right back after this.
Did you know DFW is home to a leading nationwide seat accelerator? Code Launch is an annual competition of startup software ideas produced by Frisco-based Code Authority. Attention, all technology startups in Texas, across the USA and around the globe. Apply through May 31st for your chance to win a professional hackathon team, win thousands of dollars in seed services, and pitch on our stage with your new code in hand. Apply now through May 31st at codelaunch.com.
We are back talking to Will and Alex. Check out Alto at ridealto.com. And download the app, by the way, so they can get the app at, I assume, both
the Play Store and iOS
Okay.
in the Apple Store.
Excellent. And so you guys, is this your first rodeo? I mean, is this the first time you started a company?
Well, for me, I started my first company when I was 12 or 13. I was the nerd on the block and started Coleman Computer Consulting, helping my neighbors set up their newfangled computers.
At
and
12 years
networking.
old?
Yeah. So I can't really claim that it was a true success. It made me enough money to contribute significantly to my first car when I was 16, which I think my parents were pretty excited about.
Were you able to sell the company?
I did not. It did not.
It died with you?
It neither sold nor IPO'd.
It died with the driver's license.
Yeah, exactly. It died with my move to have a car and then ultimately to Austin to go to school. So
That is so funny. You know, I used to think when my kids were young, whenever they hit 16, I was like, I hope the age by which they get their licenses gets raised to 18. Well, the closer we got to 16, I was like, please don't do that. Don't raise the age limit yet. Because by that time it was like they needed their freedom. They needed to start testing things. It was really cool. And actually, that's one of the things I love about ride sharing is that it can give a lot of freedom at a much younger age if appropriate and people feel comfortable. And that's what I love about your system is I would feel far more comfortable putting not just my daughter or my wife, but my younger child if I had one, not 4, but maybe 14
Absolutely.
into your service.
We think
with a member.
families are an underserved market.
Interesting. I lived in Washington, D.C., a suburb of D.C. when I was 6th grade to 10th grade, and it was before the metro opened up. And I would hitchhike at 15 years old to downtown. Now, don't try this at home. It's a dumb idea. I shouldn't have been doing it back then, much less today. And I don't do it today. But I look back on that and I think, what were you thinking? More importantly, what were my parents thinking by letting me do that? That was nuts. I can't imagine anybody doing that today. So again, your service is great. So you start this company. What was it? Just your neighbors that just set you up?
Yeah, it grew outside my neighbors. I didn't really have the same sort of customer acquisition strategy that Alex has been able to create for us at Alto, but I had some pretty good word of mouth, and I was
employees.
I didn't have. Well, I used my brothers as assistants sometimes. Mostly
subbed out to your brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds fraught with all kinds of
subcontracting
problems.
yeah, exactly. It didn't necessarily go well, but we were. Mostly just word of mouth through my neighborhood. It was funny when I had new customers that got further than I could walk. I'd have to schedule around my parents' schedule so they could drive me to work, which was there was no Uber then. So that was definitely my first foray into entrepreneurship, and I knew from that point that I always wanted to kind of build something bigger. And that when I joined McKinsey and went into consulting, I did so because I wanted to develop the skill set to be a great manager, a general manager, and be able to build a business one day. I didn't think it would take me 11 years to figure it out, but it took me that long to find the right opportunity and really feel like I was positioned to go create something big.
So consulting is a good training ground for becoming an entrepreneur, you think?
It's amazing.
Really?
I think so. I mean, ultimately, problem solving, is the core component of what they teach you in consulting is solving problems, and the exposure that you get to multiple different types of problems across multiple different types of companies and working to solve those, is what Alex and I now as entrepreneurs deal with every single day, right? It's just about facing a problem and using facts and your gut to make a well-informed decision and try to solve it in the best way
I would think
possible.
you're also in consulting, you're always sort of presenting to a key decision maker, somebody that can actually make what you're recommending happen or not happen. And I would think that has a whole different perspective to it. It keeps you at a very high level of always looking at how do I move this needle in a big way?
It does. And you're used to talking to people who are experts in their field, and you have to find a way to influence them, meaning that you need to know what you don't know and find ways to put together the pieces. So I think that's really important when you're an entrepreneur, is that you, by definition, are not going to be able to run every part of your business. But, no one is an expert in everything. And so kind of having that perspective and knowing where you need to ask for help and putting together the pieces is just really helpful. And then to your point, packaging and translating it so that you can talk to investors and, people who are much more sophisticated than we are in the business world, is an important skill. And I think one that we're still honing every day.
So Will alluded to a strategy that you're implementing for your customer acquisition. Tell us about that.
I mean, growth is what's going to keep us alive. If we don't grow and add customers quickly, then there won't be an Alto. So we think about it a lot at Alto. We know that the world has changed and that there's so much coming at consumers that the thing they trust most is, kind of that recommendation from a friend, virality, that sort of, grassroots. So I think the first piece has been focused on having the right product and delivering a great experience, so that when we do put people in, they then in turn tell their friends. And then the second piece has really been focused on kind of seeding that movement, finding these underserved riders in the Dallas community and finding ways to get them in the car. So how do you get them? You mentioned virality, going viral. Yeah.
How do you encourage that behavior, or can you? What do you do to get them?
You incentivize talking about you. So you go, there's opportunities like this are great, right? Getting the opportunity to talk about your product to anyone who will listen, because most people aren't going to stop.
But being on the show isn't going
day.
to get someone else to tell their friend about it.
No,
necessarily.
exactly. I mean, you have to give to get at first. So you've got to give away some rides and just start getting people in your car, and then thank them, right? Give them promotions, give them incentives for telling their friends. So you tell a friend to take an Alto, we'll give you another free ride. Things like that you can do. Same thing with social channels, right? Finding people who have large audiences who are excited about your product and getting them to talk about it while they're in the car, getting them in the ride. Yeah, but it can't be, everything has to be authentic. Consumers nowadays are smart. They're going to know if you just paid someone who has no passion for your product to plug it. You have to find people who are more than influencers, who are ambassadors, and who match your brand values, and who speak to the right audience in the right way. And it's hard, but you see it in the numbers. When you speak to the right people in the right way, it converts.
Now, you've also been on a lot of media. I've seen you on TV. I've seen you on podcasts. You've been in newspapers. I mean, you guys have done a great job of getting out there in the Dallas market, where I know you guys launched in Dallas and you're focused on Dallas right now, really building this first. So how have you gotten all of that exposure?
I think it's twofold. I mean, I think the story is interesting. The topic right now is very relevant, with the IPO we just saw from Lyft and Uber's S1 coming out last week. It's something that people are excited to talk about. The safety issue, when we first started kind of last spring, summer, it wasn't talked about as much. There weren't as many incidents. I mean, we kind of saw things because we were, in the industry, but that has become unfortunately,
Sadly.
that has become a conversation in the media. And so it's one where we can naturally participate. And then some of it has been, proactive to try to get into the press and tell our story to the business community, because, we both grew up here. We're passionate about Dallas. I would love to see more startups, more entrepreneurship come out of Dallas. And so part of that is finding ways to talk to that community and encourage more stuff like this in this market.
So in the media, have you used a PR firm, or is this all just being done by yourself?
We had she's actually a longtime friend of mine who used to be a newscaster and doesn't do PR, but as a favor, helped us meet some people kind of in the industry. I think we probably will need to engage a PR firm at some point. We're starting to get to that point in our growth where, I'm wondering when to start thinking about more formal agencies, but we've been pretty scrappy. As you can imagine, startups aren't aren't flush with resources.
No.
So
Although that does bring up an interesting point. You guys are flush with resources, at least to some extent, because you've raised a lot of money.
Yeah, we feel fortunate and we feel like it's actually really one of the only ways to kind of enter this market is with a decent chunk of change. We raised just over $14 million, and that allowed us to really spend the time necessary to build the technology and build the operation that we thought would allow us to compete, right? We felt like to enter this market in a way without technology, without an app that was really, we know we'll never be a technology company. We'll never be Uber, and we'll never beat them on technology. So we are a service company. We focus on service, but we know that technology is a really important enabler to that. And so we spent a lot of that raise really focused on our product and building a great app for our drivers and for our customers, and to build the operational support around that. That allows us to offer something that's convenient enough to match our competitors, and yet also offers all these additional features that we think are really important to the ride. And then we're using that money to scale Dallas, to grow here, to be able to have drivers on the road 24/7 or close to it.
Buy cars.
Yeah, lease cars and put drivers in them and be able to provide benefits to those drivers and pay them fairly. And our goal then is to raise more money. I mean, we've raised a lot, but Uber's raising $10 billion next week in their IPO. So
wow.
In some ways, we've raised a very, very, very small amount. And so we'll need to raise more in order to expand to additional cities and to be able to continue to expand Dallas. But we feel like if we can continue to show the growth that we have over the last few months and continue to have the conversation about how we can really differentiate, that's going to be possible.
Okay, one more break. We'll be right back. We are back talking to Will and Alex at ridealto.com, also known as Alto. The ride is silent if you're just mentioning the name of the company. So we've talked about your money raising. Congratulations, that's huge. And I know a little bit about that because my son's been doing a startup, and he actually just finished Y Combinator out in Silicon Valley. So that's
an awesome opportunity.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, 12,000 applications, 180 got it selected. They applied, previously and didn't get through it, or didn't get accepted. So it was pretty amazing. But he's back in Dallas now, and what an amazing experience it was for them. And I'm actually trying to get them. They've been a guest on the show before, and so I'm trying to get them back to talk about that experience. But raising money is a much more difficult proposition than people realize. And even after going through Y Combinator, it was surprising to me how few companies came out of that with funding already, before they graduated the program. And that kind of surprised me because I thought, well, all right, you're 180 out of 12,000. I mean, that by itself is validation. People should be just throwing money at all these people. And they were to some extent, but not in the numbers you guys were talking about, $14 million. So what was it about your deal that made it so attractive that somebody was willing to write that check?
The first thing is that we feel like we're attacking a really, really big market. We think that in startup speak and in business speak, total addressable market, you'll get asked a lot about, and we think that our total addressable market is enormous. A lot of people look at Uber and Lyft from the outside and say these are two well-established and enormous companies. How could there be anything left? But it's interesting to see in Uber's S1, they talk about the total addressable market as like $13 trillion or something. Oh
my gosh.
We believe we're going after something in the U.S. more to the order of magnitude of 20 billion, but that's a really big number. We think that the market is still extremely small, extremely early stages of a development, and that more and more vehicle miles are going to be traveled via rideshare. Actually, last year, about 1% to 2% of vehicle miles traveled were in rideshares. In major cities, that can sometimes eke up to 4 or 5%, but it's still a really, really small percentage of total miles that people are driving that are in these services, and so it's a really big market. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that we had what we believe is a really good plan, right? Sometimes it's seen as a little bit counterintuitive. But we believe that the economics behind our plan, the ownership of the fleet has a higher fixed cost, but a better ability to drive economies of scale over time. We can get better at purchasing vehicles and disposing of them and limiting our exposure to depreciation. We can get better at purchasing services and fuel and things like that in bulk that, when you bring your own car and you're an individual operator, you really can't get. And so we believe that we have a really strong business plan. And then I think we have investors that are really excited about this space, right? I mean, I think you've got to find people that are passionate about what you're doing and see the opportunity that you see.
How did you find who they were? Was this something that you knew because of your McKinsey background?
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
I had the fortune of actually working with some of our investors while I was at McKinsey. So I had that relationship, which is really helpful. And I've said before, actually, at Dallas Startup Week a few weeks ago, I really think that a lot of people when they're fundraising, I mean, it's obvious that you need to focus on terms and how much you're raising and what valuation and that sort of thing. But the relationship between a company and its investors is really important as well. And I feel really fortunate to have had a relationship with our investors before we even got started, and to have a great relationship with them now. And so I encourage entrepreneurs all the time to really think not only about the terms that they're asking for, but also about making sure that they're really excited about getting into business with these people, because oftentimes it's a 5 or more year commitment that you're kind of signing up for to work together, and that's a long time.
So you raised $14 million to kind of create the company. There's a lot of startup costs, upfront costs that are sort of fixed costs in a way, or not totally, but to a large extent.
For sure.
Your app, et cetera, your intellectual property. But once you've proven Dallas, you've got your proof of concept, everybody agrees that this works. Now you're ready to go plant that in Houston and Austin and San Antonio and Denver, et cetera. What does it cost to go into a new market?
Yeah, it costs us about that much, about $15 million to enter a new market at the scale that we really want to. We started here in Dallas, actually quite small, with just over 25 cars, and we believe we're able to do that just to kind of prove the model and service a small area. But we want to enter our next markets at a much larger scale, and this is a business that requires supply before demand. I mean, it's just like if you're starting an airline or building a hotel. Like nobody's gonna ride your airline until you're flying between the cities. Nobody's gonna stay in your hotel until it's built. So we have to put supply into the market, and then we need to go after demand. And so a lot of that cost is really just about the kind of startup cost of flooding supply into a market and creating convenience and consistency that then you can put customers into.
So, we've talked a lot about your competitors. It sounds to me like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds to me like your startup costs are going to be higher than theirs to reach a similar number of rides, let's say, and that because you have more capital costs, et cetera,
it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, it is counterintuitive. It's funny because I mean this is the reason that these companies are raising so much money. I mean, Lyft already has taken several $1 billion in funding. Uber over 10 and is raising another $10 billion. Their costs are very similar to ours, in fact, to enter a market because they have the same problem with supply. They have independent contractors, but they need those people to be available before they have customers. And so they do some trickery in markets actually to guarantee people some wages before they have customers to fill that demand or that supply. And so their startup costs, the reason that one of the reasons they'll tell you that they're losing so much money today is because they're growing quite quickly, and that growth is really expensive for the same reason that it is for us. And what we think that we can beat them on is not only some of the kind of capital costs, but also the long-term cost of maintaining a market. Driver turnover in this space, supply of drivers is very hard, right? The driver for us is really the hero and the person that we're focused on in providing that customer experience. If we can have a lower turnover rate, a lower acquisition cost, not only for our customers, but for our drivers, that transforms the business model.
Well, and you're also able to control the supply within your own company anyway. And I know I've heard some of the drivers for the other services have complained when, they go out and one weekend they can make, $800, and then the next time they go out, they're making $200. And it's like, what's the difference? Well, there were 3 times as many drivers on the street, and there's no control of that by
There's a lot of
Uber and
entropy
Lyft.
in that system.
Right. And
Yeah.
there's just a lot of driver incentives that get paid out, and it's a hard number to optimize.
So
and,
in
the driver's a bigger part of the cost. It seems, people say, oh, you have your own cars, like that must be so expensive. But really, an employee's more expensive than the vehicle.
Well, I've always heard that they pay out 80% of the revenue to the driver. Well, built into that, it's the cost of the vehicle.
The car and the fuel and the insurance and
Right.
all the things that you
So
need to-
it's not quite as obvious as it sounds like on the surface, I'm sure.
Exactly.
So you guys are really creating this huge infrastructure in the city before you really can deliver the service. What kind of time frame do you have from once you enter a market, do you think, before you actually really have not critical mass, because that probably there's such a huge upper limit to that, right? But I mean, at what point does it sort of become viable as a standalone in that city?
Well, our current plans are to make our cities kind of viable on a unit economic basis in the first year. So it takes us about 8 to 12 months to grow enough customers and to grow the operation of a sufficient scale to make each ride individually, return more than it
Right.
cost us. And then after that, there's obviously some additional overhead to cover and things like that. But obviously, the more customers, the more cars, the more drivers, and the more cities we have, the lower that number becomes on an individual ride basis as well.
Can you be in small markets? I mean, are you going to be able to be in a Tyler, Texas? I mean, it's a small town. I have a hard time imagining this really works in a small town.
It all depends. There's a lot of places to manipulate the business when you control supply, because you can close, right? And you can control when shifts are on, when shifts are off, how many cars. It's really about, the customer load you can achieve in a certain density. So if Tyler behaved like a really busy subset of Dallas and people kind of traveled within a zone, like, yes, there's a world to making it happen, but there are, that's where supply is helpful, is that you need to be creative about what levers you pull to meet that demand. So it might not, we definitely think the concept is more of a top 20 cities, and that's our near-term growth plan. But, the fact that we have end-to-end control just changes what can be done, on a number of fronts.
How many cities are on your sort of tier 1 target list in the next 5 years, let's say?
Oh, in 5 years, we think we can be in the top 20 markets in the U.S. for sure, and potentially even globally. Next year we want to be in a couple more outside of Dallas, and then after that, maybe five or six more in 2021, and by 2023, we think we can be a national presence for sure.
So, in the big picture, what's the biggest threat or risk to the company or to the industry? Maybe is a better way to say it.
Yeah, I think there's still a very uncertain regulatory future here that we're working through, that, the big names have really kind of plowed through, but it's still a patchwork of laws and regulations in different places. And so that is something that we have to pay really close attention to as we continue to expand.
Yeah, I've noticed that I'm able to take an Uber or Lyft to or from DFW now, which is nice. I've done it to John Wayne Airport. I've done it at Las Vegas. And I'm sure a few others I'm forgetting now, but that's nice because it wasn't always that way. LA, I tried to get a Uber at LA one time, and they said, all right, now stand out here. And it was very clandestine, and the whole mechanism that it's kind of like getting an Airbnb in certain places, right? Also downtown LA, not exactly the easiest thing. Well, we're going to have to call it a day. Thanks so much for being our guest
Thanks for
today.
having us. We
Thanks,
really
Will. Thanks,
Thank
Alex.
you.
Please go to ridealto.com to learn more. Check out the show at thenextlevelshow.com. And if you want to find us on podcast or YouTube, just search The Next Level Show. Be back next week with other great guests. Bye.
Thanks.